The Great Chamber of the Stellar Council was the largest structure ever built by living beings. It floated in the empty space between three ancient stars, and its walls were made of crystal that had been grown over 10,000 years. Inside this chamber, the 12 oldest species in the galaxy gathered to decide the fate of worlds. Admiral Park stood alone on a small platform in the center of the chamber. He was a tall man with hair and steady eyes. He wore the dark blue uniform of the human space navy, and on his chest were medals from 30 years of service. Behind him, floating in the void, were the holographic images of 12 billion human beings. Every man, woman, and child who lived among the stars was watching this moment. They spoke first. They were beings made of living crystal and light, and they had existed since before Earth's sun was born. Their high speaker was a massive figure of blue and white energy, and when it spoke, its voice echoed through the minds of everyone present. The species known as humanity has been judged, the high speaker announced. The Council has found them guilty of dangerous expansion, forbidden weapons development, and refusal to accept their proper place in galactic society. Admiral Park did not move. His face showed nothing, but his hands were closed into tight fists at his sides. They spoke next. They were not individuals but a collective mind that existed across 3 star systems. Their voice came from everywhere at once, cold and without emotion. In 3,000 years of star travel, humanity has colonized 17 worlds. They have increased their population by 800%. They have developed weapons that the Council banned 50,000 years ago. This growth is not natural. It is a disease. Ambassador stood at the edge of the platform, translating the alien thoughts into human words. She was a young woman with sharp eyes and quick hands, and she had spent her entire life learning to speak with beings who saw humans as nothing more than clever animals. Her voice shook as she repeated these words, but she did not stop. One by one, the other 10 species added their voices to the judgment. The who were ancient machines that had outlived their creators. The who were massive beings of stone and fire from the core of a dying world. The who existed partly in dimensions that humans could not see. All of them agreed. Humanity was too dangerous to remain in civilized space. The sentence is exile, the High Speaker declared. Humanity will be removed from all Council territories and relocated beyond the Shroud. A gasp went through the human observers. The Shroud was a region of space where no hyperspace lanes existed. It was a place of dead and dying stars, where the fabric of space itself was twisted and broken. No species had ever ventured into the Shroud and returned. It was not a prison. It was a death sentence. You are given 1 standard year to evacuate all human presence from Council space, the High Speaker continued. Any human found within our borders after this period will be eliminated without warning. Any human ship that attempts to cross back through the Shroud will be destroyed. This is our judgment. This is our mercy. Remember it. Admiral Park finally moved. He took 1 step forward on the platform, and the attention of 12 ancient species focused on him like the weight of stars. For a long moment, he said nothing. He simply looked at the beings who had condemned his entire species to death. Then he smiled. It was not a smile of defeat or despair. It was not even a smile of anger. It was the smile of a man who had just been told that the universe wanted him dead, and who had decided that the universe could go to hell. I have a message from the people of Earth, Admiral Park said. His voice was calm and clear, and it carried to every corner of the Great Chamber. We did not ask for our place among the stars. We earned it. We did not beg the elder races for their technology. We invented our own. We did not wait for permission to grow and expand. We simply grew. The High Speaker flickered with displeasure. You will be silent. The judgment has been passed. I will speak, Admiral Park replied, because these are the last words that humanity will ever address to this council, and I want you to remember them. He looked around the chamber, meeting the strange eyes and sensors of beings who had watched stars be born and die. Beings who had seen 1,000 species rise and fall. Beings who had grown so old and so powerful that they had forgotten what it meant to struggle. You call us dangerous because we grow fast and dream big. You call us a disease because we refuse to accept that our place is beneath your feet. You send us into the darkness because you are afraid of what we might become if you let us stay in the light. Admiral Park's smile grew wider, and there was something in it that made the ancient beings shift uncomfortably. But here is what you do not understand about humanity. We were not born in comfort. Our world was a place of ice ages and plagues, of predators and wars. We survived because we learned to adapt. We learned to fight. We learned that the universe does not care about us, and so we must care about ourselves. He pointed toward the shroud, toward the vast emptiness where humanity was being sent to die. You think that is our grave, but I promise you this, it will become our home. And one day, when you have forgotten that we ever existed, we will return. We will return stronger than you can imagine. We will return with ships that make yours look like toys. We will return with weapons that your greatest minds cannot understand. And we will remember exactly how you treated us when we were weak. The high speaker's light flared with anger. This is arrogance beyond measure. You are nothing but children playing at civilization. Admiral Park turned his back on the council. It was the greatest insult that could be given in galactic diplomacy, and he did it without hesitation. "We will remember," he said as he walked off the platform, "and so will you." Ambassador followed him, her heart pounding in her chest. Behind them, the 12 species of the Stellar Council watched in silence. They had expected begging. They had expected tears. They had expected humanity to accept their fate with quiet despair. Instead, they had been given a promise, and deep in the ancient minds of the elder races, something stirred, something that felt almost like doubt. But they pushed it aside. Humanity would be dead within a decade. The shroud would consume them like it had consumed everything else, and the galaxy would continue as it always had, with the elder races at the top and all others beneath them. They were certain of this. They were wrong. The last human ship crossed into the shroud on the final day of the year. Behind it, the hyperspace lane collapsed like a door slamming shut. There would be no going back. Fleet Commander stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, the largest ship in the human fleet. He was a practical man with tired eyes and rough hands, and he had spent the last 12 months organizing the greatest evacuation in history. 12 billion people had been loaded onto ships. Some vessels were proper colony ships, built for long journeys. Others were cargo haulers, mining barges, or transport shuttles that had been converted into living spaces, with nothing more than welded plates and desperate hope. Captain stood beside him, running numbers on a glowing screen. She was young and brilliant, with short hair and quick fingers that danced across the controls, but her face was pale and her voice was hollow when she spoke. "Food supplies will last 18 months if we ration carefully. Fuel is better, maybe 2 years. Medical supplies are critically low. We lost 30 ships during the crossing, and we have no way to know what happened to them." Commander nodded slowly. He had known this would be hard. He had not known it would feel like watching his entire species slowly suffocate. The shroud was everything the Council had promised. There were no hyperspace lanes to travel quickly between points. Normal space was twisted and strange, full of gravity wells and radiation storms that appeared without warning. The stars here were old and red, giving barely enough light to see by. Some had already died, leaving behind black holes that pulled at passing ships with invisible fingers. In the first year, humanity lost 200 ships. Some were destroyed by the shroud itself, torn apart by forces they did not understand. Others simply disappeared, their distress signals fading into static. The survivors crowded closer together, forming massive convoys that moved slowly through the dangerous space. Disease came next. The ships had not been designed to hold so many people for so long. Air recyclers failed. Water purifiers broke down. A plague swept through the convoy, killing millions before it could be stopped. Commander ordered the sick to be quarantined on separate ships, knowing that some of them would die alone in the dark. It was the hardest decision of his life, but he made it without hesitation. By the 5th year, hope was dying. Children were being born who had never seen a planet or felt real sunlight. They grew up in metal corridors, eating recycled food and breathing recycled air. They learned that the universe was a cold and empty place that wanted them dead. But something else was happening, something that the Stellar Council had not expected. Chief Engineer Song was an old man with oil-stained hands and a mind that never stopped working. He had spent 40 years building ships for the human space navy, and he refused to believe that the shroud could not be conquered. Day after day, he studied the strange energy readings that came from the dead stars. Night after night, he ran experiments in his small workshop aboard the Hammer of Soul. On the 7th year of Exile, he called Commander to his workshop. His eyes were bright with excitement, and his hands were shaking as he showed the Commander a small device no bigger than a fist. "The shroud is full of exotic matter," Song explained. "The Council never bothered to study it because they had no reason to come here, but this matter can be used as fuel, better than fuel. It can power a fusion reactor at 10 times normal efficiency. We will never run out of energy again." Commander stared at the device. For the first time in 7 years, he felt something warm in his chest. It felt like hope. The discovery spread through the fleet like wildfire. Engineers on every ship began building new reactors based on Song's design. Within 2 years, the fleet had more power than it knew what to do with. Ships that had been dark and cold for years suddenly blazed with light. But the greatest breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Im was a geneticist who had been studying the strange organisms that lived in the shroud. Most people assumed nothing could survive in such a hostile environment, but they were wrong. Tiny creatures floated between the stars, feeding on radiation and exotic particles. They were simple life forms, barely more than bacteria, but they were alive. Dr. Im discovered that these organisms could be cultivated and processed into food. It tasted terrible and looked worse, but it provided all the nutrients that a human body needed. The food crisis was over. Humanity would not starve. And then there was a 17-year-old girl who had been born in the shroud and had never known any other life. She was strange and quiet, preferring to spend her time staring at navigation charts rather than talking to other people. But her mind worked in ways that others could not understand. She came to Commander one day with a theory. The shroud had no hyperspace lanes, but it had something else. Gravitational echoes from dead stars, rippling through space like waves in a pond. If a ship could learn to ride these echoes, it could travel faster than normal engines allowed. Not as fast as hyperspace, but fast enough to make the shroud navigable. It took 3 years to build the first Echo drive. When it was tested, the ship traveled in 1 hour, a distance that would have taken 2 weeks before. Became a hero, and Commander promoted her to Chief Navigator despite her young age. By the 50th year of Exile, the convoy was no longer running. It was exploring. Ships spread out through the shroud, mapping dead stars and strange phenomena. They found planets that could be made livable with enough work. They found resources that the Council had never imagined. They found a home. Commander was an old man now, his hair white and his body worn. He knew he did not have much time left, but before he died, he gave one final address to his people. Every ship in the fleet received his transmission, and every human being stopped to listen. 50 years ago, we were sent here to die, he said. His voice was weak but steady. The Stellar Council believed that the shroud would be our grave. They believed that we would fade away and be forgotten, just another failed species in a galaxy full of them. He paused, looking at the images of the fleet around him. Ships that had been dying were now thriving. People who had been starving were now healthy. Children who had been born in darkness were now building a new civilization. They were wrong, Commander continued. They thought that exile would break us. Instead, it made us stronger. They thought that the shroud would kill us. Instead, we conquered it. They thought that we would forget who we are. Instead, we remembered. He smiled, and there was pride in his tired eyes. I will not live to see what we become, but I know that one day our children will return to the stars that were taken from us, and when they do, they will carry with them everything we learned in the darkness. They will carry our strength, they will carry our knowledge, and they will carry our memory. Commander closed his eyes. Never forget what they did to us, and never let them forget what we became. He died 3 days later, surrounded by his family, but his words lived on, passed down from generation to generation. The long dark was over. The rising had begun. 300 years had passed since the exile, and the shroud was no longer a graveyard. It was the heart of an empire. Emperor Park sat on a throne made from the crystal of a dead star. He was the 7th emperor of the Park dynasty, descended directly from Admiral Park, who had faced the Council's judgment 3 centuries ago. He was a young man still, barely 40 years old, but he carried himself with the weight of history. Every child in the empire knew his family's name. Every soldier had sworn an oath to his blood. The throne room was aboard the Citadel of Stars, a space station so massive that it had its own gravity. It orbited the first planet that humans had colonized in the Shroud, a world that had been named Memory. From his throne, the Emperor could see the lights of 100,000 ships moving through the darkness, and beyond them, the distant glow of human worlds. Grand Admiral O entered the throne room and knelt before the Emperor. He was a tall man with a face and cold eyes, the greatest military mind of his generation. He had spent 30 years building the human Imperial Navy from a scattered fleet into the most powerful force the galaxy had ever seen. Your Majesty, the Admiral said, our scouts have detected Council ships at the edge of the Shroud. The Emperor leaned forward. His heart beat faster, but his face remained calm. This was the moment his family had been waiting for since the day of exile. How many ships? He asked. 3 small vessels, observation class. They appear to be scanning the Shroud, trying to see what lies within. A cold smile crossed the Emperor's face. For 300 years, the Council had ignored the Shroud. They had assumed that humanity was dead, that the exile had been successful, that they would never have to think about those troublesome apes again. But now, curiosity had finally overcome them. Let them look, the Emperor said. Let them see what we have built, and then let them report back to their masters. Minister of War Shin stepped forward. She was a small woman with fierce eyes and a sharp tongue, responsible for the production of weapons and the training of soldiers. Under her leadership, the Empire had developed technologies that the Council could not imagine, ships that could bend space around them, weapons that could crack planets, armor that could survive the heart of a star. Your Majesty, we should consider destroying them, she said. If they report back, the Council will know we are alive. They may send a fleet against us. The Emperor shook his head. Let them send a fleet. Let them send 100 fleets. They do not know what we have become. They remember us as refugees in broken ships, fleeing into the darkness. They do not know that we now control 400 worlds. They do not know that our population has grown to 600 billion. They do not know that we have spent 3 centuries preparing for this moment. He stood from his throne and walked to the great window that looked out over the void. In the distance, shipyards the size of moons produced new vessels day and night. Academies trained scientists and soldiers in numbers that exceeded the entire population of most Council species. Factories built weapons that had been refined over centuries of research and development. My ancestors made a promise to the Council, the Emperor continued. They said that we would return. They said that we would be stronger than the Council could imagine, and they said that we would remember. He turned to face his advisors. I intend to keep that promise. A week later, the Council scouts detected something strange. A human ship was approaching them. Not a warship, but a simple transport vessel, the same type that had carried refugees into exile 300 years ago. The scouts were confused. They had expected to find wreckage and corpses, not living humans. The transport carried a delegation led by a man named Han. He was an old diplomat with gentle manners and a soft voice, chosen specifically because he did not seem threatening. He requested permission to send a message to the Stellar Council. He said that humanity wished to discuss peace. The scouts were suspicious, but they agreed to carry the message. They returned to Council space, expecting to deliver a desperate plea from dying survivors. Instead, they delivered something very different. The message was simple. It contained no threats and no demands. It simply invited the Council to send representatives to the edge of the Shroud, where they would be given a tour of human territory. The message said that humanity bore no grudge against the Council. It said that the past was the past. It said that perhaps both sides could benefit from renewed contact. The Council debated for 6 months. Some species wanted to ignore the message. Others wanted to send a military fleet to finish what they had started 3 centuries ago. But in the end, curiosity won. A diplomatic vessel was prepared, carrying 3 observers and a collective representative. They would enter the Shroud, see what had become of humanity, and report back. The journey took 3 weeks. The Council representatives traveled slowly and carefully, their ship's sensors constantly scanning for threats. They expected to find a few scattered colonies, perhaps 1 million survivors living in primitive conditions. They expected to feel pity for the creatures they had condemned. They were not prepared for what they found. The first thing they saw was a fleet. Not a few dozen ships, but thousands of vessels arranged in perfect formation. Battleships larger than anything the Council had ever built. Carriers that launched fighters by the hundred. Support ships that hummed with energy readings that made no sense to Council sensors. The second thing they saw was a planet. A world that had been terraformed from a barren rock into a garden of blue oceans and green continents. Cities glittered on its surface, connected by transport networks that moved millions of people every day. The third thing they saw was the people. Humans by the billions, going about their lives in stations and ships and colonies that spread across hundreds of star systems. They were healthy and well-fed. They were educated and productive. They were not the broken refugees that the Council remembered. They were a civilization. High Observer, the leader of the delegation, watched in silence as the human escort ship guided them through system after system. He had lived for 15,000 years and had seen countless species rise and fall. He had believed that he understood how the universe worked. Now he was not so sure. The tour lasted 3 months. The humans showed them everything: factories and farms, schools and hospitals, military bases and research centers. They hid nothing. They answered every question honestly and completely, and with each passing day, the Council representatives grew more and more afraid. When the tour was complete, High Observer requested a private meeting with Emperor Park. The Emperor agreed, and the 2 beings sat together in a small room aboard the Citadel of Stars. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then they asked the question that had been burning in his mind since the tour began. Why did you show us all of this? You could have hidden your strength. You could have pretended to be weak and caught the Council by surprise. Why reveal everything? The Emperor smiled. It was the same smile that his ancestor had worn when facing exile 3 centuries ago. Because I want the Council to know exactly what is coming, he said. I want them to lie awake at night, counting our ships and measuring our power. I want them to understand that they cannot stop us, that they cannot defeat us, that everything they built over 100,000 years can be swept away in a single generation. He leaned forward, and his eyes were cold. And I want them to remember that they did this to themselves. High Observer never returned to Council space. Neither did the other observers or the representative, but not because they were harmed. The humans treated them with perfect courtesy, gave them comfortable quarters, and allowed them to communicate freely with their. They simply chose to stay. Would later explain his decision in a message to the hierarchy. He wrote that he had seen something in the human empire that he had not seen anywhere else in his 15,000 years of life. He called it purpose. Every human, from the emperor to the lowest worker, knew exactly why they existed and what they were working toward. They had been forged in the darkness of the shroud, and that forging had burned away everything weak and uncertain. What remained was a people of iron. The council received this news with disbelief. Then came denial. Then came fear. Emergency sessions were called in the Great Chamber where humanity had been judged 3 centuries ago. The hierarchy demanded immediate military action. They proposed assembling a combined fleet from all 12 species, the largest armada in galactic history, and sending it into the shroud to destroy the human threat once and for all. The collective ran probability calculations. Their vast networked minds processed every variable, every scenario, every possible outcome. When the calculations were complete, they fell silent. They refused to share their findings. They simply said that military action was not recommended. The other species argued endlessly. The ancient machines proposed blockading the shroud and waiting for humanity to exhaust its resources. The beings of stone and fire wanted to use planet-killing weapons to sterilize every world the humans had touched. They simply watched and said nothing, their thoughts hidden behind their strange dimensional existence. Weeks passed, then months. The council could not agree on a course of action. For 50,000 years, they had ruled the galaxy through cooperation and shared power. Now, facing a threat that none of them had anticipated, their unity cracked and shattered. And while they debated, humanity acted. Grand Admiral O assembled the first expeditionary fleet at the edge of the shroud. 10,000 capital ships crewed by the finest soldiers the Empire had ever produced. Each vessel had been built in the shipyards of memory, using technologies that the Council could not understand. Each crew member had trained for this moment their entire life. The Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Hammer of Ancestors. It was named after the old ship where Chief Engineer Song had invented the exotic matter reactor 3 centuries ago. That ship was long gone, but its legacy lived on in every human vessel. "All ships report ready," Captain Moon announced. She was the Admiral's second in command, a young woman with steady hands and sharp eyes. "The fleet awaits your orders." Admiral O looked at the holographic map before him. It showed the Nexus, a critical junction of hyperspace lanes that connected 3 major regions of Council space. 200 Council warships were stationed there, a mixture of crystal ships and stone vessels. They thought they were safe. They thought that the humans would never dare to leave the shroud. They were about to learn otherwise. "Begin the operation," the Admiral ordered. The first expeditionary fleet emerged from the shroud like a tide of steel. They came from a direction that the Council sensors were not watching, using gravitational echoes to mask their approach until the last moment. By the time the Council defenders realized what was happening, the human fleet was already in weapons range. The battle that followed was not really a battle, it was a demonstration. Admiral O had given strict orders. No Council ship was to be destroyed. No Council crew member was to be killed. The goal was not to conquer or to slaughter. The goal was to show the Council exactly what they were facing. Human weapons struck with surgical precision. Power cores were disabled. Engines were crippled. Weapon systems were destroyed. One by one, the 200 Council ships went dark, their crews alive and unharmed but completely helpless. The entire engagement lasted 47 minutes. When it was over, the human fleet held the Nexus without firing a single lethal shot. The Council defenders were left drifting in their disabled ships, their communications still functional so they could report what they had witnessed. Admiral O opened a channel that broadcast to every ship in the system. "This is Grand Admiral O of the Human Imperial Navy," he said. His voice was calm and cold, carrying no anger or hatred. 300 years ago, your masters sent my people into the darkness to die. We did not die. We grew strong, and now we have returned." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Inform your leaders of what happened here today. Tell them that we disabled 200 ships in less than 1 hour without killing a single being. Tell them that this was not our full strength. Tell them that we could have destroyed every vessel in this system and killed every creature aboard them, but we chose not to." Another pause. "The human empire does not seek revenge. We do not want to exterminate the elder races or burn their worlds. We simply want what was to us 3 centuries ago. We want our place among the stars. We want to be treated as equals, not as lesser beings to be controlled and discarded." The Admiral's eyes hardened. "You may welcome us as partners or you may resist us as enemies. The outcome will be the same, only the cost differs. Choose wisely." The channel closed. The human fleet remained at the Nexus for 3 days, providing medical assistance to injured Council crews and allowing rescue ships to retrieve the disabled vessels. Then they backed to the edge of the shroud, leaving behind a galaxy that would never be the same. The news spread faster than any ship could travel. Within weeks, every species in Council space knew what had happened at the Nexus. The humans had returned. The humans were powerful. The humans were not asking for permission. Some species reacted with fear. The hierarchy mobilized its military, pulling ships from across their territory to defend their core worlds. They began fortifying their home systems, building massive defensive stations around their planets. But other species reacted differently. Those who had always kept themselves apart from Council politics sent a secret message to the human empire expressing interest in dialogue. Though the ancient machines requested technical specifications for human exotic matter reactors, even some collectives began to break away from the main network, questioning whether the Council's judgment had been correct. The old order was crumbling. For 50,000 years, the galaxy had been ruled by a hierarchy of age and power. The elder races commanded, and the younger races obeyed. This was how things had always been. This was how things were supposed to be. But humanity had proven that the hierarchy was not natural law. It was simply tradition, and traditions could be broken. Emperor Park received the reports from the Nexus with quiet satisfaction. The first step had been taken. The Council now knew that humanity could not be ignored or dismissed. The next step would be harder. He called his advisors to the throne room of the Citadel of Stars. "The Council will offer us a seat," he predicted. "Not because they want to, but because they have no choice. They will try to bring us into their system, to control us through rules and procedures and diplomatic games." Minister of War Shin nodded grimly. "They will try to chain us with words instead of weapons." "Yes," the Emperor agreed. "And we will let them try. We will accept their offer. We will join their council. We will follow their rules and speak their language and pretend to be civilized." He smiled, and there was something dangerous in his eyes. "And then we will change everything." Great Chamber of the Stellar Council had not changed in 100,000 years. The same crystal walls grown over, the same holographic banners of 1,000 worlds, the same platforms where the 12 ancient species had gathered to rule the galaxy since before human ancestors had learned to make fire. But today there was a 13th seat. Crown Princess Park entered the chamber with her head held high. She was young by any standard, barely 30 years old, with sharp eyes and steady hands. Her father, Emperor Park, had chosen her for this task because she represented everything that humanity had become. She was born after the Exile, raised in the empire that her people had built, educated in sciences and arts that the Council had never imagined. She was the future. Behind her walked a delegation of human diplomats and advisors. Among them was Admiral O, now old and but still carrying himself with military precision. He had led the fleet at the Nexus. He had shown the Council what humanity could do. Now he would watch as his princess claimed the reward for that demonstration. The 12 species of the Council watched in silence as the humans took their places. The flickered with barely hidden resentment. The collective hummed with calculations and probabilities. The other species showed various degrees of fear, curiosity, and grudging respect. The High Speaker stepped forward. It was not the same being that had pronounced humanity's exile 3 centuries ago, but it was a direct descendant, carrying the same crystalline light and the same ancient pride. The Stellar Council formally recognizes the human empire as a full member of the galactic community, the High Speaker announced. The words were carefully chosen, acknowledging no guilt and offering no apology. The species known as humanity is hereby granted all rights and responsibilities of Council membership, including the right to colonize unclaimed territories, the right to participate in Council decisions, and the right to protection under Council law. The princess listened without expression. She had expected nothing more and nothing less. The Council was not welcoming humanity out of goodness or justice. They were doing it because they had no choice. The human empire was too strong to ignore and too dangerous to fight. On behalf of the human empire, I accept this recognition, the princess replied. Her voice was clear and calm, carrying to every corner of the great chamber. We look forward to working with the Council to build a peaceful and prosperous future for all species. The formal ceremony continued for hours. Speeches were given. Documents were signed. Traditions that stretched back 50,000 years were observed. But everyone knew that the real meaning of the day was not in the words or the rituals. The real meaning was simple. Humanity had won. When the ceremony was complete, the princess was invited to address the full council. This was unusual. New members typically remained silent during their first sessions, observing and learning before they spoke. But the humans had never followed tradition, and the council had learned to expect the unexpected. The princess stood at the center of the chamber, the same platform where Admiral Park had received his death sentence 3 centuries ago. She looked around at the 12 ancient species, beings who had watched stars be born and die, beings who had ruled the galaxy since before her species existed. And she began to speak. My ancestors stood in this chamber 400 years ago, she said. They were told that humanity had no place among the stars. They were told that we were too young, too ambitious, too dangerous to be allowed to exist alongside the elder races. They were told to go into the darkness and die quietly, and the galaxy would continue as it always had. She paused, letting the words settle over the assembled representatives. They did not die quietly. They did not die at all. Instead, they built an empire that now spans 400 worlds and 600 billion souls. They developed technologies that surpass anything the Council has created in 50,000 years. They turned exile into exodus and punishment into purpose. The princess's eyes swept across the chamber, meeting the strange gazes of beings who had condemned her ancestors. We did not survive the shroud despite your judgment. We became what we are because of it. You meant to destroy us, and instead you forged us. You meant to erase us, and instead you gave us a reason to remember. Every generation of humans since the exile has grown up knowing what you did to us. Every child learns the story of the verdict and the long dark. Every soldier swears an oath to never forget. The High Speaker shifted uncomfortably. The past is the past. We are here to discuss the future. The princess smiled. It was the same smile that had been passed down through the Park family for 3 centuries. The smile of Admiral Park facing his judges. The smile of Emperor Park watching his fleet disable the Council defenders. The smile of a species that had been told it was worthless and had decided to prove the universe wrong. You are right, the princess agreed. The past is the past. We cannot change what happened, and we would not want to. The exile made us strong. The shroud made us united. The centuries of isolation made us who we are today. She spread her hands wide, a gesture that encompassed the entire chamber. So on behalf of the human empire, I offer you something that I suspect you did not expect. I offer you thanks. The council representatives stirred with confusion. Thanks for exile and judgment and 3 centuries of suffering. Thank you for showing us that we could rely on no one but ourselves, the princess continued. Thank you for teaching us that mercy from others is never guaranteed, and therefore our own strength is the only mercy we can trust. Thank you for making us outcasts, because it freed us from the burden of your expectations. Thank you for trying to destroy us, because it taught us that we could survive anything. Her voice grew stronger, carrying the weight of 4 centuries of history. You tried to break us and you failed. You tried to erase us and you failed. You tried to make us nothing and instead you made us everything. The human empire does not exist despite your cruelty. It exists because of it. The princess walked to the edge of the platform, looking out over the 12 ancient species who had once held absolute power over her ancestors. We are here now, sitting among you as equals, but we are not like you. We will never be like you. We remember every wound. We honor every sacrifice. We carry the names of every human who died in the long dark, and we will carry those names forever. She turned back to face the council directly. I said that I offer you thanks. I also offer you forgiveness. The human empire does not seek revenge against the species that condemned us. We do not want to destroy you or enslave you or humiliate you. We have better things to do with our time. The universe is vast, and there is much to explore and discover and build. We would rather spend our energy on creation than on destruction. The High Speaker relaxed slightly. Perhaps the humans would be reasonable after all. Perhaps they could be managed. But then the princess continued speaking, and the hope died. But while we forgive, we do not forget. We will never forget, and we will never allow ourselves to be in a position where others can decide our fate again. The human empire will continue to grow and expand and develop. We will continue to build ships and train soldiers and create technologies that you cannot understand. We will never stop, because we know that the moment we stop, the moment we become weak, someone will try to do to us what you tried to do 3 centuries ago. She smiled one final time, and there was no warmth in it. So thank you for that lesson as well. Thank you for teaching us that power is the only language the universe truly understands. Thank you for showing us that kindness without strength is just another word for prey. Thank you for making us the civilization we are today. The princess straightened her spine and looked around the chamber one last time. We forgive you, but we will never forget. And neither will our children or their children or their children's children. 1,000 years from now, 10,000 years from now, humans will still tell the story of the verdict and the long dark. They will still remember the names of the species who tried to exterminate us. They will still know exactly what you did. She turned and began to walk off the platform, her delegation following behind her. Welcome to the new galaxy, she said over her shoulder. We hope you enjoy it as much as we will. 10,000 years later, the last historian would record that the Council's greatest mistake was not underestimating humanity's resilience or adaptability. It was underestimating their memory. Humans, alone among all species, kept records of every slight and every kindness, every debt owed and every debt paid. They built monuments to their suffering and temples to their triumph. They taught their children that the universe owed them nothing, and therefore everything they achieved was their own. The other species of the galaxy eventually came to accept this truth. Humanity had not been banished. They had been unleashed. The old council crumbled within 1,000 years, replaced by a new order that humanity helped to build. The elder races faded, their ancient civilizations growing tired and slow while the younger species rose to take their place. And at the heart of it all, guiding and shaping and remembering, was the human empire. They never forgot the shroud. They never forgot the exile. They never forgot the moment when the universe had tried to erase them and they had refused to disappear. And they never let anyone else forget either. The stars themselves bore witness to what humanity had become. From a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable star, they had spread across the galaxy like a fire that could not be extinguished. They had been judged unworthy of existence, and they had proven the judgment wrong. This was the story that humans would tell for as long as humans existed, the story of how they had been banished and had returned, the story of how they had been broken and had rebuilt, the story of how they had been nothing and had become everything. It was, they would say, the greatest story ever told. And it was true.